are lots of people surrounding you right at this point in time, or your mother has commanded you to do an errand. Those are examples of So let us start with our lesson for today and our learning intended objectives or lesson intended learning objectives for the day. The first one is at the end of this session, 100% of you with 100% level of proficiency will be able to, number one, to discuss the learner-centered psychological principles. So today, we will be discussing about very important principles, and these principles are focused on the learner-centered psychology. And the second objective, after you have understood the psychological principles on learner-centered, then you will be asked to apply this in your class. So that will be the direction of our discussion for the day. Okay, let us start now. Learner-centered psychological principles. So I know that you know what's the meaning of psychology, and you have already taken up your fundamentals of psychology. And when we speak about principles, these are the guidelines that can be turned into a law for you. When you follow, you will always be doing it appropriately, especially when you're going to apply these guidelines in your class. And this is focused on learner-centered approach, because a teacher, when he is in his class, he might be using different approaches. One, there is the so-called curriculum-centered approach, wherein even the students have learned something from the session, the task is to finish the curriculum. So whether you understand the lesson or you don't understand the lesson, the teacher will proceed what is planned for the day in terms of the curriculum. We call that as the curriculum-centered approach. There is also the so-called teacher-centered approach, meaning the primary consideration in the teaching learning process is the teacher. Meaning if the teacher is in good mood, or if the teacher is not in good mood, he will be the first consideration in the teaching and the learning process. And then the students will just abide, will just comply with the minimum requirements that he is telling in the class. And of course, we have the learner-centered approach, wherein you, the students of this EdProf 2, will be the major consideration of this class. Meaning, you have the freedom to ask questions, but of course, you have to be recognized first before you ask questions, and you have to unmute. You have to always open your video. Or if you have any concern or any issue, any addendum or any subtraction about the things that you are hearing from me, you can butt in, because you are the center of this course. We call that as the learner-centered psychological principles. Okay, so those are just three approaches. We will now deal with the learner-centered psychological approach. Now, what are the characteristics of the learner-centered psychological principles, or LCPP? stands for learner-centered psychological principle. What are its characteristics? Number one. So when we speak about its first characteristics, the LCPP is focused on the psychological factors. And when we say about psychological factors, there are two factors to consider. We have the internal factors and we have also the external one, internal and external. Under internal, it is very obvious from the characteristics. It includes your habits. Number two, physiological. Habits and physiological. Jam is answering, yeah, that he is fond of playing guitar. No, that is his hobbies. And another one is about physiological factors. When we speak about physiology, this is about the internal organs or functions or internal parts of our body and its function. So the psychological factor of the learner can be affected by his habits and the status or the condition of his physical anatomy or physical body. So like for example, if you are not feeling well today, it will be difficult for you to concentrate. Or if you have something in your mind, of course, there will be another problem for you to understand the lesson for today. And as well as about habits, if you are not fond of listening, especially at this point in time that we are using the platform of Google Meet, you are experiencing a hard time to concentrate because we are not in the actual classroom, because you are used to see your instructor in person. So it will be, there is a need of adjustment for you to really focus on your studies now. So the habits as well as the physiological factors are under internal, but of course, there are also external factors to consider for the students, in considering the students as the first thing to consider in the learning in the teaching process. From Ms. Gonzalez, relationship, sir. How about you, Mark?
Happy po.
Choppy. Of course, choppy is another external factor. So you are correct. Even though you don't understand me because it is choppy, being choppy in your connection is an external factor. Diba? Because you won't be able to understand because the message is unclear. Another one from Gutierrez, commitment. Tama. If you are not committed, actually, commitment is an internal factor. No, commitment is an internal factor. But when we speak about external factor, the things that surround you as a student, why you are not able to perform. No? So that's an example of external factors. Say for example, the lightings. Hindi pa. Kayo, Alice? Hindi. Then you have the, maybe there are lots of people surrounding you right at this point in time. Or your mother has commanded you to do an errand. Those are examples of external factor. Then let us proceed. Then besides it focus on the psychological factors, number two, it is intended to deal holistically the students. So the learner-centered psychological principle is intending to deal with the students fully in its whole. So when we speak about holistically, what do we mean? You are correct, Ms. Gonzalez, family problem is another example of external factor. What do we mean when LCPP intends to deal holistically the students?
About mental health.
Okay, so we are referring to the total aspects of the person, which includes not only the physical, but of course the mental, emotional, intellectual, katulad ng what Miss Rigondola have already chatted, and then Miss Sophia Lintal said artistic and everything. So we are intending to help the total person. And the LCPP, let us proceed. It must be applied to all learners. So meaning, we have to be fair to all our students, especially you. When you will be handling your own students, you must always be applying the LCPP in all your students. Like what I am doing today, I am accommodating all your concerns. If there are problems in your connection, if there are problems in your microphone, if there are problems in everything about you. So we will be considering that, and that's the characteristics of the learner-centered psychological principles, or LCPP. Let us proceed. What are the composition of the learner-centered psychological principles? The LCPP is composed of the following. There are 6 under cognitive, 6 principles under cognitive. So keep on remembering once again the 3 domains of the student. So what are the 3 domains once again? 3 domains of the learning process. We have cognitive. Yes, very good. JT Cristobal, cognitive. Psychomotor. Ano pa? Mark.
Affective po.
Okay, very good. Affective and?
Psychomotor.
Okay, psychomotor. Okay, alam nyo naman pala. So you have to really memorize the 3 domains of the student. We have the heart, affective. We have the head, the cognitive, and we have the hand, psychomotor. Now, the LCPP is composed of, under the head or the cognition, we have 6 principles. Then, under affective, in the heart, we have 3 principles. And then under social aspect, we have 2. Affective pa rin yun. And then we have 3 under individual differences, because this pertains, of course, to the psychological principle. So we have no psychomotor. Only we have cognitive, and we have about affective. 6 cognitive, and there are, of course, another 8 for the affective. 2 social and 3 individual different. Let us now proceed with the discussion of the principles. Under cognitive factors, the first of the 6, we have number 1. We have to look at the nature of the learning process. The nature of the learning process. What is the nature of the learning process? It is said in our lecture that learning of complex subject matter is more effective when it is intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. Now, of course, there is a simple subject matter. A simple subject matter is a subject matter that only caters to the lowest taxonomy. Say, for example, you will just have to define, you will just have to recall facts, you will just have to recall names. Those are simple subject matter. But when you are using and attending to the higher order thinking skills, most of the subject matters are complex subject matter. Now, it is said, when the nature of the subject matter is complex, it will be effective, meaning the students will learn faster if the teacher will. Anong gagawin ng teacher? The teacher will have that intention to process from information, from facts to experience. Meaning you will not only to teach about facts. You will not only to teach about principles. You will not only to teach about information, but you're going to relate it to what your students are experiencing. Like what I am doing today, I'm asking you some questions and I'm asking you to give your example of your personal experiences. That is about constructing the meaning of an information, the meaning of the facts or the definition of something, and then relate it to your own experience. It will be more effective if the students can identify themselves what they are experiencing are being mentioned in the class. That's the first one. You have to remember that. So how are we going to apply this in the class? Number one, how will you apply this if you are now a teacher? No, always ask your students to give their personal experiences is one way to attend to the first principle. Let us proceed with the second principle. Goals of the learning process. What is the goal of the learning process? The successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful, coherent representations of knowledge. Ano daw ang goal dyan? What is the goal of the learning process? To create meaningful knowledge. If after this class, you're going to put into your minds that you are going to love teaching, it means that you have learned something from this class in whole. But if after learning the principle number 2, then there is no change in you, it means that I did not reach my goal for this session. So every time that you are in the class, then something is derived or is received by the students, it means that your goal for the learning process is achieved for that day. Because, ang sabi dyan, you will be reaching your goal if the students have learned the meaning of the knowledge that you are sharing for the session. Say for today, I am teaching you about the LCPP, then you have learned about all the 14 LCPP or 14 principles, then it means that my goal have achieved this morning. Let us proceed with number 3 under cognitive factors, construction of knowledge. Ano daw dyan? What is a successful learner in terms of construction of knowledge? The successful learner can link information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Say for example, what I'm discussing now, there is something in your mind. You are using the metacognitive process. What is in your mind at this point in time that can be related to our discussion at this point? Anybody? If the students at the point that you are discussing is constructing something in his mind, it means that you are applying number 3. If at this point in time, you are thinking about a classroom scenario, and then you are imagining that your students are so active in performing a certain task, it means that number 3 is operating in you because you are constructing knowledge within yourself. Or another explanation is, if at this point in time, there is something that was taught to you by your instructor previously when you were on the first year. One of your instructors have taught to you something about construction of knowledge, then this is just a repeat to you. It means that number 3 is operating in yourself. That is the meaning of construction of knowledge. It means that you can link the lesson that is being discussed today from the previous lesson. It is number 3. Okay? So construction of knowledge, meaning that the things that you have learned before is you can connect the things that is being discussed today. That is number 3. Let us proceed. Number 4 is strategic thinking. Yes, that's correct, Miss Gonzalez. Nagpa-flashback yung dating na pag-aralan. That is very good. Now, while you are doing a flashback of your previous knowledge, then you create a new knowledge that is construction of knowledge. You are not only doing a flashback or a review of the past lessons, but you can create another new one. That is construction of knowledge. Number 4. Very good, Miss Gonzalez. Number 4. Let us hear from... okay, sir. Alexi Aconia. Connecting a new knowledge. Yes. Number 4, the successful learner can create and use a repertoire of thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve complex learning goals. That is called strategic thinking. Okay? So at this, how will this principle be applied to this class? Okay. Now, of course, those of you who are majoring in English, you have told about the schema theory, that in our minds, there are different rooms. The many rooms that you can proceed, it means that the more intelligent you are. So, if at this point in time, say for example, you have 30 rooms, 30 different informative rooms in your mind, a room for cell phone, a room for telenovela, a room for its course that you have, a room for your love life, a room for your family, or any room. Say for example, there are 30 rooms in your mind as of this time. Number 4, it means that you are using about 5 rooms at the same time. That is called strategic thinking. The successful learner can create and use a repertoire of thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve complex learning goals. When we speak about repertoire, it does not only refer to only one strategy, to only one thinking and reasoning strategy, but it pertains to about more thinking and reasoning strategies. So the students who have this one are called students who are experts in the use of the thinking and reasoning strategies. They have moved on from memorization. They have moved on the question of who, what, when, where. They can answer now why, they can answer how. We call them as students who are good in strategic thinking. Let us proceed. Number 5. Thinking about thinking. O, alam nyo na yan. Higher order strategies for selective monitoring mental operations facilitate creative and critical thinking. Only people who can be called creative are using these number 5 principles. thinking about thinking or metacognitive. Now, the artists, the script writers, the authors of books, the researchers can be considered as creative individuals. And they have, of course, produced critical thinking because they have used their metacognitive skills, or they think about their thoughts, thinking about thinking. And last, number 6, for cognitive factor, context of learning. Learning is influenced by environmental factors, which include culture, technology, and instructional practices. So this is very apparent at this point in time, where we have a different practice in the instruction. You are just seeing me in your cell phone. You are just looking at me in your laptop. Is a different instructional practice. Culture, technology. We are now using the technology as the main source of the teaching and the learning process. We are not in the four corners of the classroom where you are seated and then your instructor is standing, and there are lots of performance activities or tasks that you're going to do. So the context of learning is another LCPP factor to consider for a successful teaching in the learning process. It is really an effective influencer to the learning process. The culture, technology, and instructional practices. Next, after this, I will give you a quiz, so you listen very carefully. Number 7 is under now affective factors, because we have already finished about cognitive factors. Affective factors number 1, this pertains now to the hearts. We are now already finished with our mental aspects. This time now we are in the affective factor, influences in learning. Ang ganda, no? This is very good. A very nice LCPP or principle. When you become a teacher, you have to always remember this principle. Ano daw? The what and how much. The what and how much, meaning the rate of learner. Say, for example, at this point in time, I have prepared for you 10. Then how much of the 10 after 1 hour have you learned? Is the what and the how much. Ano daw? What is the factor that you're going to have an increase in the rate of learning? It is your own motivation. Yung meaning you are, if not forcing yourself, you are always on the go to learn. That is having initiative. No. Now it is said in the, thank you, Miss Rigondola. Miss Rigondola got a perfect score today for being active in the recitation. Congratulations. Mark Brian Boniqued. If you cannot use your microphone, just do some chatting so that we will understand if you are alive. Miss Alexi Acuña, sir, encourages persons to give their best and help in reaching enterprise good. Very good. And that motivation can be, ang sabi dyan, it can be your beliefs. No, if you have your faith in God and that faith in God inspire you to do good, that's very good. Then your interest, if you are really interested to become a teacher, if you are interested that after 3 years, you will receive your diploma and pass your LET, your goal, and then of course your habits. According to Ms. Gutierrez, my tuition motivate me, sir, and also correct, because you are spending money, not small money in education. Dapat tama yan. Very good, Gutierrez. That is very practical. Your Ms. Gonzalez, your desire, your needs or drives wishing to individual. So that is about number 7. Let us proceed. Let us proceed with number 8, intrinsic motivation to learn, yung panloob. The learner's creativity, higher order thinking, and natural curiosity are all contributing to motivation to learn. Ano yung internal, intrinsic? Learner's creativity. Number 2, you're being critical, higher order thinking. And number 3, natural curiosity. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by the task of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevant to your personal interests, and providing for personal choice and control. According to Salandanan and Purpose, learning takes place only when the door of the students is open. Learning takes place only when the door of the learner is open. Whatever we do, if you are closed, if you are locked, nothing you will learn. Whatever technology, whatever strategy we will be using, if you are not interested, there will be no gain. That's the meaning of intrinsic motivation. There must have in you that will motivate you, that will inspire you to do more. That is intrinsic. It can be your attitude. It can be your experience. It can be, of course, your being so curious with this class or with other class so that you can perform. Number 9, effects of motivation on effort. So we have motivation and then effort. Acquisition of complex knowledge and skills require extended learning effort and guided practice. So nag-e-effort ka dapat. Hindi yung when you come in with this Google Meet, you will just listen. When you come in with this Google Meet, you will just sit down. You make an effort. You must be ready to always participate in the discussion. If there is a problem in your connection, you can do a chat. It means that you take an effort. Extended learner effort and guided practice. Without learner's motivation to learn, the willingness to exert this effort is unlikely without coercion. So meaning, motivation is related to effort. The more motivated you are, the more effort you will give. If you have no motivation, you will not give any effort. That's the meaning of number 9. Next, number 10, developmental influences on learner. An individual develops if there are different opportunities and constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. What is the meaning of this? Ang ibig sabihin nito, mag-mature ka, iha. Mag-mature ka, iho, ibig sabihin. The more you are maturing, the more you will be learning, the more leveling up of learning. Okay? Kapag hindi nagmamature physically, emotionally, or social, when you cannot control yourself, you will not learn. But if you are emotionally mature, even though you have a problem at this point in time, then you will be learning much from this class. Let's proceed. Number 11, social influences on learning. Learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. This is a bit of the problem for you as students, because one way to have an effective teaching and learning process is socialization. Now, our socialization now at this point in time is through mass media, through the media, through the technology, through the Google Meet. You are not seeing each other personally, so there is a problem in the social interactions. Another problem in the social interactions is the internet, the connection, or the microphone, the status of your microphone. No. Then, of course, there must have an interpersonal relationship, meaning you have to deal with your classmates. So at this point in time, these are our problems. So number 11 might be a very difficult principle to follow in the teaching in the learning process. But in the actual scenario, in the teaching and learning process, this will really be applicable if we will have a normal life. Then number 11 will be applicable. Okay? Let us proceed with number 12. 16 ito, individual differences in learning. So you have already studied this in your psychology. Learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are function of prior experience and rarity. You 14 students, you have 14 different characteristics, you have 14 different strategies in learning, you have 14 different capabilities to learn. So no two individuals, even twins, are not alike. Number 13, learning and diversity. Learning is most effective when differences and learners' linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds are taken into account. So you have to really know your students. You have to really know how the students learn faster. Is it from their linguistic? Because there are some of you who are good, who can express themselves in English. There are some of you who are ashamed to open their mouth and speak in English. There are some of you who are in the city. There are some of you who are in the barangay. There are some of you who are in the mountain. Kaya mahina siguro yung connection. That is about cultural. Okay? Number 14, standards and assessment. In LCPP, you must also set appropriately high in challenging standards, and assessing the learner as well as the learning progress is equal to including diagnostic process and assessment, which are integral part of the learning. You will thoroughly understand number 14 if you are enrolled in assessment of learning 1, because in assessment, you will understand the value of assessment in the teaching, in the learning process. Next, so these are the 14 individual difference factors. So you have to remember them, and after that, you must apply them in your class in the future. Summary of the 14 TCPP. Or the LCPP pala yun. LCPP, hindi T. Knowledge base. It, of course, it is knowledge base, meaning the principles are knowledge base. It is also strategic processing and control. Motivation in effect. You must be motivated to learn. Next, number 4, it is developmental. And of course, we consider individual differences. The situation in the context are, of course, needed in the application of the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. That ends our discussion for today's lesson.